because of aliens, Skip.
You mean immigrants, and I know that's what you mean.
Immigrants from City Alpha 5.
This is City Alpha 5.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field!
Hey! Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax. I'm Skip.
I am Jake.
Hey, that is true.
Hey, where are we today, Skip?
Wow, that's a good question. If I had to guess, I would say that I don't know where were you going? I don't know where we are. Are we fictional? Is it real?
We're in Keystone City or Central City or Opal City or...
Oh, Opal City. There's a deep cut. Star City, Coast City.
In the thing, because in the DC universe, there's all kind of made up places that we could be.
That is true. This is the focus of this episode, and I think this may have been more mainstream question when the Arrowverse first started, but I think it's still relevant.
It's just unique.
It's weird. It's weird, but I totally understand the reasoning behind it. So, unlike Marvel, whose entire universe is either in space or somewhere in New York, DC creates fictional cities that stand in for their real-life counterparts. Though these things have changed over the years, most of them have a fixed location, which begs the question, where in the world are DC cities?
America. The government.
It's the backbone.
It's the backbone of DC Comics. It's something that Marvel actually did back when it first started. So in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they had a lot of... Not a lot, but more made-up cities that, say, Toro and the Human Torch would be in.
Oh, the original Human Torch. The android.
The original Human Torch, like a Central City, which appeared in 1946 in the Human Torch comics that was set in California. But I would say in the 60s boom of that next wave of Marvel characters, your Incredible Hulk, X-Men, Iron
Spider-Man.
Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers, etc., Spider-Man, to make it more, at least I feel, more relevant to the real world and set them in something that felt more tangible to the reader, they put it all in places that they knew. You know, the Hell's Kitchen is a place in New York City that Daredevil could be from. The Empire State Building is, prevalent at all times.
Do you remember when Spider-Man created that huge web between the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center?
Yeah.
In that trailer we all saw in the theaters and now doesn't exist anywhere online.
Stuff happens.
That is the kindest way to describe 9/11.
I mean, Marvel does have plenty of fictional places they made.
Oh, sure.
Madripoor, or Koa, Latveria.
Genosha.
Yeah, but all of these are kind of like
Wakanda.
far-off islands or, on another continent. Everything that happens in the Marvel Universe essentially happens in America that you know and live in.
And almost all of it in New York.
Yes, yeah. A good 90% of everything is in New York in some form or fashion.
Which is really weird because, you'd think you'd be literally bumping into superheroes left and right constantly.
Which is why something like Marvel's was so fascinating.
Oh, it's a great book.
You're following a guy who's, constantly there are supervillains and world-ending terrors that are hitting New York City every other day.
I really love that Galactus issue. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Marvels, which is a fantastic book, is that one written by Kurt Busiek or is it Mark Waid?
That is Kurt Busiek.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, because Mark Waid wrote Kingdom Come. Both of those were hand-painted by Alex Ross. But in Marvels, it follows the career of a Daily Bugle photographer or reporter, right? Reporter.
I think at the time he was doing both.
Oh,
I
okay,
think he
sure.
mostly took pictures.
That's what I thought too, because he's a real character in Marvel. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
I think in that story he writes articles and then they get compiled into a book that is like his memoir of living in
That's right.
as a reporter.
So the idea is that you're actually seeing the famous events from the Marvel universe play out as if in real life, and you are a spectator instead of the godlike camera view that we see in comics. You're the guy on the street standing underneath Galactus when Silver Surfer arrives to herald his arrival. You bear witness to these events through the perspective of the common man, which is what Cloverfield tried to do and does to a certain degree succeed in doing. It's a Godzilla movie, but from the perspective of the fleeing Japanese. That's what Marvel's is. It's just watching from the ground level all of these crazy things that happen. Like the first issue of Fantastic Four when they're fighting that weird frog monster that comes out of the ground. People are there, right there on the street, watching all that. So you would think that New York was a crowded and, quite frankly, impossible place to live if all this stuff is going on, right? Because we're talking like a 9/11 every week.
Yeah. No, it would be constantly. I mean, people you know would be injured, would be involved, would be killed. I mean, you'd want to leave, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would imagine there'd be a max exodus out of New York. It kind of reminds me of that video that is sort of a meme right now, the cafe diners in Paris.
Oh, yes, where everything's
literally on fire
burning outside.
Yeah,
and
they're like rearranging the seats to serve people food.
Yeah.
It's basically exactly what New York would be if that were the case. What comic deals with that? Something deals with that. It's not Powers, it's...
Damage Control?
Well, yes, there is Damage Control, which is a DC property that became a very unpopular TV show.
Oh, no, I'm...
Oh, was that the Marvel one? Because there's a DC version of that, too, that was a TV show, starring Vanessa Hudgens and Ellen Tudyk.
So that was kind of based on the Damage Control concept.
Okay, so it is a DC one. Because there's a Marvel version of that.
No, the Marvel one is Damage Control.
Oh, okay, but there is a DC version of that.
No, it's interesting conceptually. It's just whether it actually works dramatically.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Ron Perlman's character in Pacific Rim, it's that, where you see all the ground level people either exploit or are impacted by the events that we see and read about, these enormous 57 9/11s that happen every day.
Or in that first Spider-Man film, where Damage Control actually is, pseudo-involved.
Kind of.
You're seeing how an industry springs up out of that.
Not the first Spider-Man film, but the first.
No, Spider-Man Homecoming?
Yeah, that's where you get Vulture. That's where you get Michael Keaton. Whether it's Batman, Vulture, or Birdman, that man's got wings. I'll tell you right now.
Can you fly? Yes, I can.
Can you dig it?
Consider it, Doug. Talking about the cities in DC land.
Right, we were talking about Marvels and yada, yada, yada.
The yada, yada, yada over the best part.
I mentioned the bisque.
Which DC city is sponge-worthy?
Ooh, that's a good...
I mean, it'd be Opal City, obviously, right?
I don't know. What is it? St. Rochelle or whatever it is, whatever the version of Baton Rouge that Hawkman lives in.
Oh, well, I mean, jump right into it, my man.
Let's dive head first. So we got to give a little bit of background. So yes, DC likes to give fictional cities that stand in for real places. I think for the reasons we were bringing up, because if you lived in New York and all those things happened, it would be the craziest place on Earth and maybe in the universe. But if you set them in a fictional city or a multitude of fictional cities, kind of makes more sense because not only can you spread everybody out, but you can sort of control the way that each city responds to the events that occur because of superheroes and supervillains. And that kind of became the backbone of DC's narrative storytelling. And it started with Superman and Batman. So obviously everyone knows that Superman lives in Metropolis and Batman exists in Gotham. That's one of the weird ones where in real life they stand in for the same city. That is actually New York. And you can kind of say that one's the day side and the other's the night side.
There's Metropolis and there's Gotham,
right.
But there's also New York City. It does exist in the DCU.
Yes.
what the Teen Titans and Justice Society were based out of there for a while.
There were times. The idea is that fictional cities that DC creates stand in for real cities. Then they had to acknowledge that the cities that they are, I don't want to say parodying, but standing in for also exist. So that made the universe a lot different than the universe in which we live. It was kind of the opposite of the point of them standing in for those cities, because now you're changing the entire profile of the city you are trying to be.
All right, you have all of the cities that are in America, plus all of these other cities.
Mm-hmm.
So are there 50 NFL teams now? Is there 100 Major League Baseball teams?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like it.
How are they not eating each other's citizenry? I've been just like taking up the resources, the space.
Yeah.
It's just funny. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't really work on a functional level for these fake cities.
Doubling all of the major cities in America.
Exactly.
In the case of New York, quadrupling. You're right, because Metropolis has a baseball team and a football team, and so does Gotham. So you combine that with the New York Jets and the New York Giants, the Mets and the Yankees, we got a lot going on. But acknowledging that those cities do exist creates necessity to explain the context in which the actual real-life cities exist compared to those other cities. Because if Metropolis is like New York that everybody, outwardly projects to the world, and Gotham is the New York that, the fear-mongering of crime, what the fuck is happening in New York, right? This is one of the greatest examples of this, of how the real-world cities are changed by this. In our world, obviously, New York is called the Big Apple. In DC, New York is called the Cinderella City, because it is between, on the coast, Metropolis and Gotham, making it the unloved stepsister of those two major cities that make America famous.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that New York in DC is a different New York than here. Granted, in Marvel, that New York is different than our New York, but in a different way. It changes its entire context because of the cities that do exist. Now, on more than one occasion, DC has tried to establish exactly where these places are to clear up confusion created by poor editing oversight or overzealous writers changing things to suit their own narratives. But not surprisingly, most of this came in the mid-1980s when DC was trying to get everything on the same page and establish a solid continuity, which would eventually lead to Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Crisis klaxon.
Crisis. Drop the beat.
In the background, John Wick is shooting people left and right.
It's Crisis, directed by Jonathan Nolan. Christopher Nolan. Sorry,
no,
wrong.
It'd be more interesting
wrong
with
Nolan.
Jonathan Nolan. Honestly, I want to see what that goes.
Yeah.
That happens in that techno music plays, and out of one side in the periphery in the background, you see John Wick murdering people, and on the other side, Blade is slicing through vampires until they meet in the middle. Now I'm interested. So in doing so, DC did attempt, and this is kind of a deep cut, because a lot of writers, especially today, ignore this as canon, but a lot of them actually embrace it and tailor their narratives around it. But the biggest source for this specific information was an official, fully licensed DC role-playing game called DC Heroes by Mayfair Games in 1985. Perfect time to release that, or maybe the worst time to release that. I'm not really sure which. In it, the game makers used information provided by real writers and editors of DC to establish the company's official atlas of locations. Now, one of the coolest things that I think lends the most credence to the authenticity is that one of the writers that they employed for this is Alan Moore, who used this platform to write the source material for the origins of the Watchmen characters. Even the stuff that's not in the book. He outlines the origin stories for later on. That source material would be used by DC Comics to frame the plots of before Watchmen. that shameless money grab that ended up having some good writers. So, author Paul Kupperberg was an editor at DC before he created the game to which we refer. He famously wrote Doom Patrol that preceded Grant Morrison.
Okay.
Now, there have been sporadic attempts to make these cities less anchored in the real world, which, I mean, honestly goes against the continuity and stability that DC tried to establish. The things that appealed to me, canon, stability. You know, I'm a Star Trek fan. I want to know what's happening when, and I want it to all be in canon, and I want to be able to win trivia. God's sake. In the modern world, for instance, the Nolan-era Batman films intentionally kept Gotham's location vague, even though we know it's on the coast somewhere because they have ports. They go so far as crafting police cars' license plates to say Gotham instead of the state it's in, which, I mean, for New York, that makes sense because it's New York City in New York State in New York County. But Gotham City is not in Gotham State or Gotham County. So it's an aesthetic thing, but it kind of irks me a bit. But that's because they don't want to establish exactly where it is. Hell, in Batman versus Superman, it does the same thing by implying that Metropolis is its own principality. Kind of like Washington, D.C., for instance, where Washington, D.C. has its own plates and its own stuff, but it's not a state, right? So that's kind of what
Why would that be?
Yeah, I know, exactly. Why would that come about, right?
I'm just imagining a time when...
Before Sigourney Weaver.
There's the fiefdom of Metropolis that battled against New Amsterdam, trying to incorporate it, and it ended up being its own thing.
That's almost literally how New Hampshire started. But isn't that also the origin that they eventually retcon for Gotham? Like with the Court of Owls and all that stuff?
Trying to pin the history of Gotham, especially as they get... Yeah,
it's changed a lot.
Bit of a shit show there.
Yeah, well, some of it's great. I think the Court of Owls is cool, but then the whole, like...
Not that it's not cool. It's just like keeping it straight and explainable. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's gotten to X-Men levels at this point.
Yeah, and every story is another... The secret history of Gotham.
Now it was founded in 5000 BC by Caveman Batman. And before all of you scoff, that's a thing.
I know. I just get so tired of all of that.
You can thank Grant Morrison for bringing that back. Only he can handle it. Honestly, though, any official word from the DC brass has been, let's say, spotty at best.
It's crazy. I mean, that's one thing that makes this difficult, is that it's constantly changing and it's never solidified, which is why you chose the one, but you chose a map that's 40 fucking years old.
During the Batman story arc No Man's Land, a real-life mapmaker was hired to detail an exact look at Gotham, which is considered official canon today. And I'm including the show Gotham, the Nolan movies, probably Titans. There is an official map of Gotham that is universally used.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from this mapmaker for this game. And then later, they published a guide to Metropolis after the changes made to the Superman universe after his death and resurrection in the early 90s, 92, 93. Which means that the official atlas of the DCU is the last official map ever made, authorized by DC Comics, which in my estimation is the only map left in official canon. A lot of these elements are still used today. And there has never been another official contradiction of those locations. So we kind of have to assume that's it, right? List of DC Universe locations. Oh, that's way too long a conversation to have. Because they include the Batcave, Crime Alley, Batman's bathroom, you know? Like, no.
Well, where's that at? I have a camera I need to set up.
Well, were you at Blueberry Hill? So 3 editions of this game were printed. The DC Heroes role-playing game. Be part of the legend. published by Mayfair Games in 1985 originally, reissued in 1989, and then again in 1993, which I think only reinforces my point that it is the last official canon map that we will ever get.
That I can neither confirm nor deny, but I've probably been more maps since, printed in some issues, I would assume.
Well, yes, absolutely. It was published in 1985, literally at the same time that DC released Crisis on Infinite Earths, which obviously reshaped the DC universe. As a result, the game included both Silver Age continuity and pre-Crisis alongside post-Crisis write-ups. So they gave expansions that could accommodate both.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It kind of does. Well, doesn't DC continuity always a nightmare?
You're not wrong, dude.
And then, as an interesting side note, Mayfair released a simplified version of the game called the Batman role-playing game in 1989 to coincide with Tim Burton's Batman. And so, because of this nonsense with continuity, the second issue of DC Heroes was a boxed set which contained a booklet called Read This First, a, quote, rules manual, and an introductory adventure, quote, exposed, and a, quote, background roster book with the same statistics for almost 250 DC characters. It also contained the Game Master screen, an wheel for resolving gameplay, 2 decks of cards with statistics for DC Comics updated, and dice. And the rules incorporated material from the 89 Batman release and the Superman release sourcebook from earlier. This, of course, includes rules for advantages, drawbacks, gadgetry, yada, yada, yada. And in 1993, it was reissued with material from The Death of Superman and The Reign of Superman story arcs. But all the rest of the stuff was the same. Okay, so according to the role-playing game, just like with Marvel, there's a whole thing about New England that gets very specific. So we'll break that down as we go. But here are some of the bigger points. This one is actually one of the most debated, I think, of the locations. That's Star City, which you see in Arrow, the Green Arrow, canon. Because in the show Arrow, it starts out as Starling City for some ungodly reason. They had to make up a fictional version of a fictional city. Star City is one of the oldest.
1941?
I mean, DC Comics started in 1938. According to the atlas to which we're referring, that is in Northern California, which would make it about where, based on its location, because I lived in this area just north of where this is, this would have been, you'd have to go through the Redwood Forest to get to this from Oregon. This would be about where Crystal City, California is. Is that, hey, what's that city we went to with the world's saddest aquarium? Crescent City, California.
Okay.
Which is a real place and does have the saddest aquarium in the history of the world. That shark wanted to die. That's essentially where they say that Star City is located. And Northern California is completely different than Southern California. We can get into the state of Jefferson at some other point, but it's debated whether that exists there or in Ohio as a stand-in for Cincinnati.
It's just like looking at the history of Star City, and it seems to have been placed all over. DC Comics presents number 87. Star City essentially replaced Boston, and it's been suggested to be in Connecticut or in the Great Lakes or where Des Moines, Iowa is.
If Des Moines had a superhero, that'd be fascinating. What would he do?
So there have been Iowa superheroes. There's been the Quad Cities.
Yeah, the DJs, yeah.
Yeah, that's where Wild Dog comes from.
Wait, do you know more than one of the Quad City DJs? I'd be very, very impressed.
The actual vigilante, Wild Dog, in the DC continuity.
Oh, the actual... Okay, I was thought you were talking about real life. Also, I'm impressed. Deep cut.
We have a guy who's a Mad Dog collector. He's from the Quad Cities.
For Wild Dog? You called him Wild Dog. I thought it was fine.
Woof.
I knew what you... Wow. I know what you were talking about. He's right up there with Vigilante and Peacemaker for me. He's just one of those weird, tangential, strange, almost parody characters. I always took it that Star City was in, Ohio, or somewhere in the Rust Belt, where, after industrialized mining and all the environmentally horrible things that America did during the Industrial Revolution died off, which made that area inequitable for the common man, made sense to be the home of Green Arrow, who models himself after Robin Hood. And so that made sense to me. But yeah, I mean, there are times, even in the Arrowverse, where they talk about it being close to Coast City, which is the next one we'll talk about, the stand-in for San Diego. Not San Francisco, not LA, it is San Diego.
And not the San Diego that we also have to talk about after this. It's one of my favorites. DC Rebirth in 2016 specifically states Star City as actually being Seattle, only later being renamed Star City. The Arrowverse put Star City near San Francisco instead. However, in Season 3, Episode 9, another flight map shown briefly on-screen locates Starling City, changing the show to the Great Lakes region. So it's all over the place.
Wow. It's the wandering earth of DC cities.
It's crazy. I mean, that's one thing that makes this difficult, is that it's constantly changing and it's never solidified, which is why you chose like the one, but it's
pretty typical.
You chose a map that's 40 fucking years old.
Yeah, well, but there are things that have never really been contradicted since this atlas was created. And honestly, this is the only comprehensive map. There have been other attempts to define the locations and map out certain areas. Like I remember in the early to mid 90s, DC put out they have a fictionalized version of like Time magazine or Newsweek, I guess, kind of both, called what's it called?
Is it Mine Tamazine?
Well, you're not too far off. It's called News something. It's
The News.
No, it's called News Time. It's called News Time.
News Time. Huh.
They, as a promotion, published an actual issue of it in magazine size, and in it was a comprehensive map of Metropolis, which is made up of boroughs like New York. And nobody ever refers to that, even though it came out before the No Man's Land Gotham map, which is still in fucking canon. But unfortunately, these cities move all over the place. But this official atlas does place it in Northern California, which is about where Crescent City would be. So Coast City, which is the stand-in for San Diego, is the hometown of the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, specifically Hal Jordan.
Do you mean Parallax?
He called himself Parallax, yada, 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 the green, yes, the yellow flaw, blah, blah, blah. Coast City is its stand-in, and Hal Jordan was a test pilot.
Yeah, it's called Top Gun. I've seen the film.
It's called fucking Top Gun, asshole. Pretty good movie.
Yeah, even the sequel's pretty good too.
You want to watch it again? We're gonna watch it again.
Let's get sweaty and watch it, bro.
Let's oil each other up and play volleyball and go to Kansas City barbecue. It's very easy to tell that it is San Diego. You were correct about Coast City not literally being San Diego, because San Diego does exist in the DC universe, and something happens to San Diego. Would you like to explain?
Well, in both the fake San Diego of Coast City and San Diego in reality, both are essentially destroyed.
True. One by the cyborg Superman during the Reign of the Superman arc.
And the other one when San Diego became Sub Diego.
Oh, I want to think it's clever, and then I also hate it so much. I
just love that it essentially sinks, gets flooded, and then they just kept using it. It became a new Atlantis place to go to and hang out.
Yeah. So in it, Aquaman is the one that saves them all. He comes in and gives every resident of the former San Diego the ability to breathe underwater, and then it becomes an underwater city. But why didn't they just evacuate? And how long did that take? Because you would think they would just drown. I mean, that doesn't seem to work on any logical scale at all.
No, I never quite got it. I just thought it was dumb and fun.
It is. It's dumb and funny.
But what happens to the zoo? You're going to give all of those... I mean, did he magic? You know, how did everyone get that power right away?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, future...
Oh, yeah, he bargained with the sea gods, the knowledge to control magic.
There you go.
Such power warped the Justice Leaguer into a deformed being, but left him able to raise Sub Diego back on dry land.
Oh, so that it didn't even last. Great.
I don't know. None of it really makes sense. It's just dumb and fun.
It is dumb and fun. True.
I always think of that little character in Dora the Explorer.
You know for a fact I have never watched that, so...
No, it's Dora the Dom and her sub Diego.
I'd say Dora's a switch. I don't know. I mean...
I can't say that I really know her sexual preferences that well.
Well, maybe she's just a brat. I don't know.
I mean,
she seems a
little too
eager to please.
Well, I mean, I think part of that's
we have already
incorporate that in the bratty.
We've already gone too far with this specific metaphor.
It was literally just a one-line bit, but
already too far. At this point, it's going to devolve into those porn cartoons where Peter Griffin fucks Marge Simpson or whatever.
The dog and Family Guy is banging the Jetsons' mom.
That's exactly what Marge Simpson jerks off. I don't know if I can handle that. And obviously, there are a lot of fictional cities. We won't get through all of them, but some of the other highlights, and this is, well, let's go through some of the other ones that are big ones, like Opal City. Do you have a lot about Opal City?
I have a lot. It's pearly, it's white, it's great on a neck.
I don't think that's what Opal is.
Yes, but Opal City...
Oh, isn't Opal City where... It's not Plastic Man, is it?
It is Elongated Man.
So close!
Yeah, so that's where Elongated Man and Starman hail from. But Opal City...
That's funny, because I'm looking at a map.
You got a map?
Yes, that has... Here, I'll send it to you. That has...
Oh, it says it's in Maryland.
Yes, that says it's in Maryland, which is odd. But this one does have Star City in Washington, so I guess there's that.
Yeah, I don't...
What the fuck is Jump City? What the fuck is Jump City?
Watch out for Street 21 on that city.
Okay, so a lot of these things on this map, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And then over here, I will send you this so that you can see how completely wrong this apparently is in the most important ways.
See already.
Look on the West Coast.
It's the best coast. Oh, whoa.
Right?
That's a big weird one.
It has Metropolis, just northern Coast City in California.
Well,
by no measure is that correct.
I wonder how many times people have said Metropolis is somewhere far away.
Well, I mean, my understanding was always that because of the Cinderella City thing, that Metropolis was in, like, Maryland or Connecticut. I guess Connecticut. And New York was in New York. And then Gotham was in New Jersey. Or that Metropolis was, like, upstate New York. Or, you know...
I can't find anywhere that says Metropolis other than that one funky map on Reddit. Everywhere else says Metropolis was either in Kansas for a short time, but mostly New York.
That's just from Smallville.
Technically, that was in John Byrne's 1986 revamp of Superman.
What?
Cited the city as being in Kansas.
No, that was the official canon post-crisis.
Well, it's not nothing's perfect, my friend.
Yeah, I guess that's the point of the whole thing. That they all contradict each other. But let's get to some of the other ones, too.
Yeah, let's just hit some of the other big ones here.
Okay, we'll get to our favorite one here in a second, but...
Ooh, what's our favorite one?
Well, obviously, you know what it is. There's a place called Midway City, which... It's probably Chicago, even though some map...
I can't imagine why they'd say that.
Can't imagine why. Even though a lot of them have it placed in Michigan for some reason. So in the Batman continuity, you have both Gotham and then Bloodhaven.
Bloodhaven is the one that's always fascinated me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, all right, it's called Bloodhaven, which
is awesome with umlauts.
With umlauts. So is there like a big Eastern European denigration there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about it. The Dutch founded most of New England, so I mean, it's not that weird, right?
It always felt like grittier than Gotham.
Yes. So, okay, here's my take on Bloodhaven, and see if you concur. So, because, Gotham is the dark side of New York, and because New York exists in the DC continuity, I always took Gotham to be more like Baltimore. But I think there's a fictionalized Baltimore, which is Bloodhaven.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that.
I could totally see McNulty being a cop in Bloodhaven.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like they place it in southern New Jersey, but,
well,
I mean, that's,
depends on which map you're reading.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's like, if there's going to be a DC The Wire, it would be in Bloodhaven.
But 100%, yes. So you mean that show that they were trying to make on HBO Max?
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
It will never happen now. And then, of course, you have things like Fawcett City, which is interesting because they had to squeeze or shoehorn in. They had to shoehorn in Fawcett City, which was the hometown of Captain Marvel, a.k.a. the boy child who wields the power of Shazam.
Shazam!
And Fawcett City, to my understanding, I always interpreted it as Boston.
Yeah, but apparently it's both been in the Midwest and in the most recent Shazam movies kind of set in Philadelphia.
Which would kind of fit with the Boston thing, because that's part of a megalopolis. That kind of would make sense. But you're right, yeah. There are times where Fawcett City is essentially where Aurora, Illinois is, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay. That would jibe with that whole thing. And then you have things like St. Roche, which is not New Orleans. I don't think it stands in for New Orleans. I think it stands in for Baton Rouge. I just always got that vibe. And maybe I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure New Orleans is a city in DC, but St. Roche is where Hawkman hails from. And it just always seemed dirtier, like Bloodhaven. It always just seemed grimier. So I always assumed it was Baton Rouge.
So it was like, okay, gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
that last map I sent you. Here's one of my favorite things. In Nevada, there's a place called Casino Town.
I wonder what they do there.
Macrame center of the world. Also, in Wisconsin, there's a place called Dakota City.
Dakota City.
And in Nebraska, Dairyland.
You're not even trying.
Oh, hilariously, in Florida, there's a place called River City. What? How is that not a Midwestern town?
Sometimes I forget that the audience can't hear me shaking my head.
Okay, so other notable DC cities would be...
Well, there's Smallville, obviously.
Well, obviously. Smallville, from what I understand, aggregated over every interpretation of it, is that Smallville is in mid-central Kansas, but most recently, especially, northern central Kansas. And there really isn't a lot of debate about that. It's not like people are arguing about it. It's essentially somewhere between being on I-70 or being north of that. The atlas here to which we're referring, Smallville is in straight up central Kansas, basically west of Topeka. Well, no, I think west of Lawrence. So it's not on 70.
Drink it.
Because
make it part of you.
In the greatest Superman movie ever made, Man of Steel, Clark wears a Royals shirt and is watching Kansas football, which makes him obviously a fictional character. And so you have to assume it's near Lawrence and still within a stone's throw of Metropolis. I mean Kansas City.
Well, if he was from Kansas...
Oh, boy.
Which city do you think he'd actually be traveling to and maybe be the hero of?
Oh, there's a really great question. Because I was hoping we'd do this last, but that's a good segue.
What else do we really want to cover before then?
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of garbage in here.
I mean, unless you want to get in the deep nitty-gritty of Gotham City, or...
We don't have to get that deep.
We don't want to do Codsville or...
Oh, Midway City, that's not necessary. Or Coeur d'Alene, whatever.
Yeah, National City. It's like...
National
Which
City.
is the worst name? National City?
Yeah, it doesn't make
Come
any
on.
sense. And also, isn't that a fictionalized version of Metropolis?
Well...
Or maybe DC, I guess?
I mean, National City's like, it's around Los Angeles, so...
Oh, well, I always assumed it was on the other coast.
Well, I'm sure somebody wrote that too, but...
That's true. The city to which we are about to describe...
Or cities, rather.
Cities. One of these cities was at one point in the 50s placed in Ohio. But other than that, it's almost completely consistently set beating Heart of America, ladies and gentlemen.
That you have no connection with whatsoever.
The place from which Jake and I hail. We're talking about the hometowns of the Flash's Keystone City and Central City, which are the fictionalized version of Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas.
So funky that they did that.
It is, especially since Kansas City exists in the DC universe. In fact, there's a Star Labs in Kansas City, as made in canon in a Justice Society issue by Jeff Johns. So, for those of you who don't know the setup of Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, here's a little bit of history, and we're going to get more in depth in this than we do other cities, mostly because we're from there and we're proud. Kansas City is a city on the conjunction of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, and oh wait, no, is that? No, that's not right. It's just no, not Mississippi. It's the Missouri and the Ohio River, right?
You might want to edit that bit out.
Oh, I'm going to. Don't worry. It's at the mouth of the Missouri River.
It's in your mouth.
At one point, St. Louis was the westernmost eastern city, but then go down the river and then you land in Kansas City. It was created as a trade post and a hub for the expansion to the west. Little known trivia. St. Louis, which has the fucking arch, which is referred to as the gateway to the west, that was originally supposed to be in Kansas City. The gateway to the west was the name that was bestowed on Kansas City by, I want to say, Teddy Roosevelt?
Teddy Floosevelt.
But because Lewis and Clark started their expedition, Louisiana purchased territory. Kansas City is also the starting point of the Oregon Trail. More specifically began at essentially the constantly changing border of Independence and Lee Summit. And it really is the opening of the west of the United States and our expansion into what we refer to as Manifest Destiny. Now, Kansas City, Kansas was created because Kansas City was a popular and bustling western city that was close enough to the Mississippi and the Missouri that it got all the trade from Memphis and St. Louis, and essentially starting in New Orleans and everything east, and then expanding into the west. Kansas City, Kansas had a bunch of people that lived in the middle of fucking nowhere that saw that there was money to be made by people arriving in Kansas City, and since the West wasn't organized by white America at the time, there weren't a lot of signposts. There weren't a lot of directions on where to go and where you are. And so smaller towns in that area on the Kansas side, which wasn't even a state at that point, decided to coalesce and call themselves Kansas City, Kansas, so that they would trick people who came off the fucking river to trade their goods. And when they'd show up, they'd be like, "Hey, is this Kansas City?" And they're like, "Totally, yeah, come on over, bro."
That's exactly what they sounded like.
And come on over yonder, bro. And then they eventually tricked enough people to have enough settlers and make enough money to incorporate into an actual city called Kansas City, Kansas, which is separate from Kansas City, Missouri. And it was long before the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was signed into law by Franklin Pierce, the saddest president ever. So they are essentially twin cities, like, for instance, Minneapolis and St. Paul. One legitimate, the other a fraud. One a bustling metropolis, the other a fucking parking lot. And I'm going to piss a lot of people off with this one.
I know. I love your burning rage at all times.
Jason Sudeikis and Paul Rudd and Eric Stonestreet, they'd all be pissed if they ever heard this, but guess what? They're never going to hear it. So
Sending it directly to all of them.
they're all from Overland Park. And so Kansas City, Kansas somehow scammed its way into being a real city. But they are twin cities, and they do, in a lot of ways, cooperate like Minneapolis and St. Paul. Their only division being the river that splits them. And so, in The Flash, Central City and Keystone City are fictional stand-ins for Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. So it's Central City, Missouri, because Kansas City geographically is one of the largest, that is closest to the exact center of the United States. And Kansas City, Kansas is Keystone City. So those two became the Flash's hometowns. Now, other than the brief time in the 50s in which Central City was referred to being in Ohio, Central City has almost always been in Missouri, and Keystone City has always been in Kansas. There's very little debate, except for that run of Jeff Johns, because Jeff Johns is from Detroit, that he wanted to make it in Michigan, even though he never quite came out and said it. He went out of his way to establish that Kansas City was real so that he wouldn't have to set Central City in Kansas, in Missouri. And geographically, according to this atlas and several others, Central City and Keystone City are exactly like KCK and KCMO, but just north, essentially transplanting where St. Joe would be.
Interesting thing, in the Young Justice cartoon, a St. Louis Gateway Arch is actually in the background in Central City.
Whoa! And so that, obviously, since that's from where we hail, that's our favorite one, but it's also the most consistent. You know, people could debate where Gotham is, Metropolis is, Fawcett City is, Coast City is, but for the most part, the Flash has essentially been Kansas City's own superhero, back and forth between Kansas and Missouri, depending on which Flash it is.
Yeah, that's another thing. So from Keystone City, you have the original Flash, Jay Garrick, and Wally West. But from Central City, you have Barry Allen.
The main Flash, yeah.
That's odd, because I think most people, when they think of Kansas City, they kind of think of Kansas City, Missouri, biased as we may be.
Mm-hmm. One time I went to a wedding where I didn't know anybody. I was a +1 for somebody who didn't want to go alone in Mississippi. And it was an antebellum home, which, that was rough. And, it's a bunch of Southern debutantes. And I remember one of them tried to make conversation with me and was like, oh, so you said you're from Kansas City? And I was like, yes, I am. Proud Kansas City. And like, oh, so you're from Kansas? And I was like, no, I'm from Missouri. Blank stares. And then I was like, well, there's two Kansas Cities. Blank stares. And then I was like, there's two different ones. They're in different cities. It's kind of like Minneapolis and St. Paul. Blank stares. And eventually they just stopped looking at me and started talking to somebody else. Okay.
Well, they didn't truly care.
They don't know where the fuck it is. Unless they're from there, or know people from there, or have been there. They think it's in Kansas when you first tell them that.
Well, as someone who has no point of reference, they probably just think, well, Kansas is in the title. Of course it's going to be in Kansas.
Right. You would think that. Right. Just like Dakota City is in Wisconsin. Well, there's also a Texas City, Missouri, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. There's a Missouri City, Texas. So what the fuck does that say?
I don't know.
Exactly. But that's our personal favorite. It's probably the best one to end on because it's honestly the most rock solid as far as every reference point. It's pretty much universally accepted, and those are the ones we hang our hat on. We're proud of that one. Maybe we will get into some maybe more of the more ancillary or apocryphal cities that DC uses, like Hub City and,
That's right next to Chubb City.
Well, it's halfway to Chubb City.
That's on the way to Erectionville.
That's essentially, you get your big points there. And there are obviously weird cities that other people are from that nobody's ever heard of. Like, most people don't know what Opal City is. But and until Arrow, nobody knew what the fuck Star City was, that's for sure. And don't forget Evergreen City, which is also in Washington.
Yeah.
And Challenger's Mountain Amusement Park.
You don't say.
Which is in Colorado.
Colorado?
Mexico? New Mexico? No. Kansas, Colorado.
New Texaco.
No, it's Colorado. It's in Colorado.
Okay, real quick. So in Keystone City, I know it's not Central City as we would probably identify with more, but Which sports team are you a bigger fan of? The basketball Keystone Kings, the hockey Keystone City Combines, or one of the baseball teams, Keystone City Patriots, or the Keystone City Salamanders?
Oh, well, first of all, obviously the Salamanders.
Which is odd. I mean, I don't really think of Salamanders as being a Kansas or Missouri staple.
Have you ever been to Devil's Icebox? They are all over the place.
I'm not saying that there aren't salamanders there. It's just, I don't...
Yeah, it's not like our state animal.
Yeah, I don't really think of it as...
Well, and it's funny that the Keystone Kings, because what are now the Sacramento Kings were for a long time in Kansas City. Not a long time, a brief time. We're in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's a fun, like the history of teams, and especially why they have the names they have. You know, like the Utah Jazz. They got the name because, well, they were in New Orleans for jazz.
They moved to a place that doesn't allow music or whatever.
The Lakers go from the Great Lakes to Los Angeles.
Which should make them like the Tar Pits, you would think. Yeah. Or the Clippers that were in San Diego, but now are in LA, where there are never any Clipper ships. You have the Metropolis Mammoths, which is their, I want to say, football team? No, I think it's their baseball team. I think their football team is the Titans, I want to say. And then Gotham has the Knights, which is both their baseball and football team.
Which is probably the best by far, right?
Sure, but I mean, it's dumb that they're both called that.
You know, if it's good enough for one, make it good enough for two.
Yeah, I mean, St. Louis had the Cardinals football and baseball team, so it's not that weird, I guess.
In European sports, you know, you'll have an ownership group that owns multiple sports entities. You know, like Barcelona has Barcelona Football Club, but they also have Barcelona Basketball Club and the Barcelona Water Polo Club. And
that's because they don't know how to name teams in Europe. The only thing that's even close in European-style naming is like Arsenal, which is whatever in American naming.
Oh, I mean, there are other teams that are similar, but yeah, usually it's the...
Like West Ham United. They're called the Hammers, but that's a slang term. It's not actually their name. They're just called West Ham United.
Yeah, I mean, Tottenham are the Hotspurs, and Wolverhampton Wanderers are the...
That's kind of awesome, actually.
It is, but the weird thing is they call themselves the Wolves. They
can't even get that right.
You had two names there, and you went completely off the board.
It's such a European thing to do.
Ooh, the Metropolis Meteors.
Oh, is that their baseball team?
That it says that they're a football team.
Oh.
A home to the Metropolis Metros and the Metropolis Meteors.
Oh, there used to be the Mammoths. That used to be one of their
And in
teams.
the Smallville show, it was
90s.
the Metropolis Sharks.
That's so fucking stupid.
The Metropolis Generals basketball team.
Oh no, they get beat by the Globetrotters every week.
The Metropolis Mammoths are the ice hockey team.
They're the hockey team?
They're the hockey team.
No.
And the Metropolis Monarchs, baseball, as well as the Metropolis Meteors, which are also baseball. The Metropolis Meteors baseball team, apparently there's both a football and a baseball team.
Oh, see, yeah, okay.
But it says the New 52 having a rivalry with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Oh, come on.
Does that make any sense?
Not really. Well, St. Louis thinks it's an eastern city, so whatever, I guess.
Well, it's probably also like the Metropolis. Oh, maybe it's in Kansas at this point in time, depending on who's writing or creating.
Yeah, it depends, yeah.
We'd both like to thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you are a fan, do like, share, subscribe. If you wouldn't mind giving us 5 DC Cities rating on Apple iTunes or your podcatcher of choice, that would be appreciated.
On Yelp or
on Grindr.
I was going to say Expedia, but you're in the same ballpark. Yeah, if you want to give us on Bumble or Truth Social.
Plenty of Fish. Is that can I get rated on Plenty of Fish?
Well, I'm sure you are at this point. WikiFeet.
No, don't rate us on WikiFeet.
Angie's List.
This podcast does not condone that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Although we're a strictly non-kink shaming podcast, so
thank you.
All right.
Back page,
front page,
page,
side page,
page 6.
turn the page. That's a Bob Seger site.
Against the Wind, that sounds like something that I could get behind.
No, you want to get in front.
Oh, you're talking about drafting now.
Well, we are a big NASCAR podcast.
We do like to plug a lot of Waffle House jams.
What's the preeminent Waffle House jam?
Well, I mean, it means different things to different people.
I asked you.
In my opinion, until they switched to the digital jukeboxes, the best Waffle House jams that we could come up with were Against the Wind by Bob Seger, I Will Always Love You by Dolly Parton, not Whitney Houston, and No More I Love Yous by Annie Lennox.
Interesting. All right.
America, ladies and gentlemen.
Wouldn't Breakfast in America by Supertramp be like a good Waffle House jam?
Absolutely, 100%. When it comes to that, though, and I'm glad you brought that up, as a huge Supertramp fan, at Waffle House, we would usually play Take the Long Way Home.
Yeah.
Or The Logical Song.
Well, those are like your...
The balance you have to strike is you want to do something unique that's kind of a deep cut because it shows don't just play top 40 bullshit. But at the same time, you don't want to alienate your audience. So you got to get something that they may have heard before. So you don't pick some bullshit Elvis song.
Makes sense.
And that's our guide to Waffle House jams, ladies and gentlemen.
Set in fictional cities in the DCU.
Set in your Waffle House in a DC city near you.
At your Central City's local Waffle House.
All the good stuff happens there at 3 a.m. Trust me.
It's just you and Gorilla Grodd and big stack of pancakes.
Mirror Master and Rainbow Rider are all hanging out, splitting the All-Star special.
Big pile of dirty fries.
That's not Waffle House.
I don't know Waffle House official.
Blasphemy. Gorilla Grodd gets his hash browns smothered, covered, and capped. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Covered and capped?
This is Waffle House lingo.
Okay, well, do instruct me.
And that's much like DC Comics. So with that, don't forget to pay your tabs. Don't forget to clean up after yourselves to some sort of reasonable degree. Don't forget to tip your wait staff. Don't forget to get the hell out of here. Don't forget to support your local comic shops and retailers. And from Dispatch HX, we would like to say Godspeed, fair wizards.
Yes.
Have some.
Please, go away.